Does psychology even use science? Psychology as a whole is a relatively new field. Sigmund Freud only first came up with the idea to study why people do things in 1886. How much science do you think Freud and some of these other early psychologists had used in their studies? In reality, it was next to none. Although Freud's work is still used today, much of it has been discredited. Carl Jung's widely used theory of archetypes is about as provable as the flying spaghetti monster. On a closer look, both of these famous psychologists appear to develop many of their theories based on their personal experiences alone without any scientific rigor. What about today? Do the core values of solid science make it into the psychological studies that we see get propped up in modern times? The answer might shock you. This is understanding behavior. Science is a word that gets tossed around so casually that it's almost lost its meaning amongst the general public. Let's talk about what makes up good science. Science is a process of logical experimentation that is used to reach our best current understanding about how an input causes certain outputs with something about the universe. To do this, scientists must isolate a single input change between two otherwise similar things and see if that changes the outputs. Let's do some quick science. I hypothesize that if I use 35-pound weights on my dumbbells, then I will be able to do fewer curls without putting down the weights before reaching failure than when I'm using 15-pound weights. I'm pretty confident in my hypothesis, but the point of science isn't to be right, it's to take the right process to build significant evidence that something works the way it does and gives us some data on what to expect. Let's start with some definitions. Here's what I came up with for both curls and failure. A curl is when arms are fully extended, followed by bending of the elbows upward until the elbow is fully extended. Failure is when a curl is attempted, but elbows are not able to fully extend. Time for some curls. Let's start with the 15-pounders. Whoa, 54 curls. All right, let's try out the 35-pounders. But wait, science requires me to only do a single relevant change between my conditions. And if I do my curls now with the 35-pounders, I won't be fresh like I was with the 15-pounders. That's a confounding variable. Confounding variable? What's that? It means that something else that is relevant changed other than the thing that we're studying. So if I was going to do the curls now and did fewer, I'm not sure if it would be because of my fatigue or if it would be because of the change of the weight. It ruins my beautiful experiment. Okay, nerd, guess you got out of your curls today. Before we get to the conclusion of my experiment, let's talk about the kind of research that I'm doing. This is called a single subject design because the entire experiment is done with one individual, me. B.F. Skinner, who is said to be the granddaddy of behavioral psychology, was one of the first researchers to use this type of experiment in psychology. One of the big advantages of it is that you can see exactly how this change variable impacts performance for that individual. If I were to run this experiment in a group design, I would have to randomly select a bunch of people and assign them to one of the two conditions. Either they curl with 15-pound dumbbells or 35-pound dumbbells. Then I would measure how many curls each person could do before failure, run the numbers, and see if there's a difference. Nick, I did a group design with the same experiment, and you're never gonna believe the results. Try me, mister. I don't know what a confounding variable is. There's no difference in how many curls people can do with either 15 or 35-pound weights. Bullshit, let me see those data. Nope, that's the conclusion. The average for 15-pound weights was 0, and the average for 35-pound weights was also 0. No difference, you're wrong, goodbye. And you randomly selected these participants? Did you get a lot? Yep. 10 people from the 3-year-old room at the daycare, randomly selected. Okay, and now you're reporting it as a fact that increasing the weight doesn't lower the amount of curls that somebody can do? That's what the data say. I'm gonna go contact BuzzFeed so they can write an article about this new breakthrough in exercise science. Oh, you go do that, but that does not mean you did some good science there. What went wrong here? Well, it turns out that other Nick's random selection didn't fit a population that this study was relevant to. None of the 3-year-olds could lift any of the weights. but the conclusion that he made extended to all people. Group designs are the most commonly used designs in psychology, but they inherently bring on this limiting factor. The most studied population in psychology is college students, and some of the research with college students is used to make extensions to massive groups of people such as all millennials or all men, all women, all religious people, etc. Making these broad generalizations based on a limited and pseudo-random group of people is damaging to the field of psychology. It is not good science. First strike for psychology and science. Even studies that keep their due diligence by selecting 100 plus random people that fit their studied population criteria may not be enough to make the conclusions that they would like to. For example, if the study was on Americans, it's difficult to confidently say that 100 random Americans would provide a sufficient sample size that represents the way that over 300 million individuals would react in an experiment, yet researchers and journalists write about these conclusions as scientific facts. I hope you see the problem here. Especially when you see a clickbaity headline about a psychological conclusion, we need to be skeptical about their samples, sample sizes, and how this research was done. In addition, the group design methodology fails to show us the factors that affected individuals. There could be many people that were even in the study that the conclusion did not apply to. Psychology and human behavior is wickedly complex, and this methodology steers us away from studying individuals and the things that might help them. Instead, our culture has evolved towards cookie-cutter treatments like go to therapy and or take this pill. More on this topic in a future episode. In my single subject experiment, I care about the nuances. What else do I need to control when I go curl my 35s? First, since I took pre-workout before my first set with the 15s, I have to take it when I curl the 35s too. Next, I should also do the curls around the same time of day to match the energy levels of the first condition. I need to wear the same shirt I was wearing both days as well. Okay, maybe I can ignore this one as long as I can move well in both the shirts during the test. If a variable is unlikely to impact the performance on the test in any meaningful way, we can ignore it because it won't confound our data. Looks good, time to curl. The results are in. With the 15-pound weights, I was able to curl 54 times until failure, and with the 35-pound weights, I was only able to curl 4 times until failure. So in conclusion, this means that if I up the weight of my dumbbells, I will be able to do fewer curls. Woo! My hypothesis was correct, and I didn't even need to fudge my data. If this conclusion weren't so obvious, what I would do is to continue to do one day of 15-pounders and one day of 35-pounders back to back. This is called an alternating treatments design, and it helps me avoid a confounding variable called the practice effect. If I were instead to do 5 days of 15 pounds and then 5 days of 35 pounds, I might be stronger on day 1 of the 35 pounders as opposed to day 1 of the 15 pounders due to that practice. By alternating between the two, I'm exposed to both weights with various and about equal average levels of training behind me, which eliminates this confounding variable. We just did some pretty good science. We came up with our problem, defined our variables, made a hypothesis, designed an experiment, controlled for confounding variables, collected some data, and got some results. This single subject design got us to where we needed to be, and it showed us how capable I am at curling both weights. Despite how powerful this technology is, it's not commonly used in psychology outside of a small group of behavioral psychologists like myself. Behavioral psychologists are taught to view the world a bit differently from others, and that we think that behavior, like every other natural phenomenon, is deterministic. What this means is that we believe there will always be clear relations between inputs, or what an individual experiences, and outputs, which is what the individual does, and we study them. There are laws to behavior just like there are laws in physics. For example, the law behavior does not occur without past reinforcement is as fundamental to our understanding of nature as gravity pulls things downwards on Earth. If you don't know what reinforcement is, check out our video, Why Anyone Does Anything. I strongly believe that this framework of behavior is the key to better understanding each other and advancing psychological methods to make us all happier and healthy. Alright, I'm off my soapbox for now. Let's talk more about group designs in psychology. Quick recap. In group designs, after we've identified our problem and hypothesis, researchers have to randomly select a bunch of people, split them into 2 groups, make one single change between those groups, and take data along the way to compare for analysis. One of the groups will receive the current best treatment for something, or possibly receive a placebo treatment. The other will receive the intervention that we are testing, whether that be a pill, new therapy approach, or something else. When running group designs, there most often is not enough resources, human or otherwise, to observe each individual's behavior, so experimenters typically use subjective measurement. And they do this in the form of survey data. Is this problematic? Think about the last 5 times someone asked you how you're doing. Did you provide not only a sincere but accurate response? How about the last time your partner asked you, is something wrong? Reports about behavior are not the same as measuring behavior directly. Once again, we have another factor that kills tons of credibility for good science in psychology. Let's check out this recent headline from SciPost.org. Young adults today are more perfectionist and report more pressure from their parents than previous generations. Let's dig into their data. They did 2 different meta-analyses, which is essentially when a researcher takes a bunch of other researchers' data sets and then analyzes them. In this one, they found positive correlation between the results of the questions they asked about perfectionism and perceived parental pressure, all subjective measurements. The first rule in science is that correlation does not mean causation. So the first study gave us a correlation about some subjective data. Sweet, real solid science there, bud. Study number 2 then did another meta-analysis across a 32-year period, seeing how parental criticism and expectations changed over time. I will give the researchers props because in this one, they analyzed 82 different studies, totaling nearly 24,000 individuals in the US, Canada, and Britain. A very healthy number and a seemingly diverse population set. Their data found that parental expectations have increased over time, but guess where they got their populations? You know it, college students. What do you think? Is it a confounding variable to only look at college student data when measuring parental expectations? You're getting the hang of this. Of course it is. So the study that is claiming to pertain to all young adults now has its scope limited to college students. You might ask, well, wasn't that just the clickbaity headline? Nope. That's the title of the research paper. Thumbs down for good science. I chose this article fairly randomly from reading our psychology posts on Reddit, and it was the first one that I went through while writing for this video. The fact is that a huge amount of psychological studies would fail this assessment of good science. In group designs, statistics is one of the most common ways to prove credibility for something. This tool is both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, massive data sets are incredibly difficult to understand without the use of statistics and can be extremely valuable if used well. On the other hand, it gives researchers the ability to toy with the numbers to reach the conclusions that they want to reach. The details of how that is done is beyond the scope of this video, but it is possible by altering things such as p-values, eliminating outliers, removing a set of participants from the dataset, and many other methods. Not only that, but university and research culture requires researchers to get published to get and maintain your role as a professor. And you only get published if you find confirming results in your research, adding extra incentive for bad faith actors to unethically tweak their datasets. More on that in a future episode. All of these factors have led to a massive replication crisis in psychological research. It makes sense because so much of it isn't science. If one research team uses bad science to confirm their hypothesis, and another team tries to replicate their experiment using good science, it shouldn't be a shocker at all that there would be large disparities between the 2 datasets. Another interesting headline caught my attention the other day. A UC San Diego study found that papers that cannot be replicated are up to 153 times more likely to be cited due to interesting results. There's a strong chance that your favorite psychological fact is not even a fact at all. Our society as a whole needs to be more skeptical about what they read on the internet, even if it looks legit. Psychologists, we need to do better at bringing real science into our profession if we want to be taken seriously. Want to start thinking about psychology in a more scientific way? Check out our video, Why Anyone Does Anything, to get the ball rolling. Together, we'll work to understand behavior with some integrity. Cheers.